In lesson 1.2c, I talked, or in the notes, I should say, you found out a lot about the, the vocabulary terms, or the word terms, factors, coefficients, and constants. So since these were main vocabulary terms from this lesson, I'm going to go ahead and highlight them in yellow. And what's important to realize is this little note on the right-hand side. So if I go ahead and take my purple highlighter then, and with this lovely big fancy bracket, we're going to see the note that says, these all have an effect on a function. If one of these changes, the original function changes. So what that means is not only do you have to understand the vocabulary in the fact of what these different words mean or the purpose behind them, but you also have to understand that if you change the number of terms in a function, or if you change the factors, what you're multiplying in a function, or if you're changing the coefficients in a function, and finally, if you're changing the constants in a function, that is going to have some sort of an effect on what your original function was to what your new one is now that you've changed those different things around. So we're going to go ahead and break these down, or these vocabulary words down one by one. So let's go ahead and first focus on the word terms. It's important to understand that terms make up a function, or there can, what we need to understand is when we're adding or subtracting, we are adding or subtracting terms. So I'm going to go ahead and use like this little bracket underneath here for the negative 5p. Then I'm going to use another little bracket for the negative 4. And finally, I'm going to use another bracket to represent the positive 8x. So what these brackets mean are that there are a total of 3 different terms in this expression. So my first term is negative 5p. My second term is negative 4. And my third term is a positive 8x. So in this expression, because there's no equal sign, so it's an expression, there are 3 separate terms. Let's go ahead and move on to the word factors. Factors are 2 numbers that when I multiply them together give me a product. So for example, in the first one, this 4 is factor number 1. Then I'm multiplying by a second factor, so this is factor number 2, which finally then gives me a product of 16. So factor number 1 times factor number 4 give me a product. Likewise, here when I'm looking at 2 factors that are variables, this first x is factor number 1. This second x, factor number 2. And when I multiply them together, I get a product of x squared. Moving on to coefficients then. Coefficients are any number that is in front of a variable, or really any number being multiplied by a variable. So my coefficient in 3y is the positive 3. Be careful not to circle the y with it as well, because otherwise then, going back up here, you are circling what's called a term. So the coefficient of y is a positive 3. Likewise then, the coefficient of z squared is this negative 2. And please include the negative 2 because the negative symbol is very important. Lastly then, the coefficient of c is 5 because 5 is being multiplied by c. So these numbers that I circled are all numbers that are in front of variables, are all numbers that are being multiplied by variables. Finally then, in my last example below for constants, I have an equation. An equation, remember, is 2 expressions that are set equal to each other by an equal sign. So in my equation, I see a total of 2 constants. The first constant is a positive 8, and the second constant is this positive 7. So what a constant is a number that is by itself. So a whole number, a fraction, or a decimal that is either being added, subtracted to an expression or to part of my equation, or the constant of the answer, so what it equals. So remember, the important thing is to understand the specifics of all four of these vocabulary words, but also to realize this note on the side here, that when you change any of these things in a function, it's going to have an effect or change something to the function, which has an overall effect on the image or the graph that you would put on a coordinate plane in the end.